And here with us now is New York Times Chief White House Correspondent Peter Baker, Maria Teresa Kumar, President and CEO of Voto Latino, and former Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. So, Peter, I want to just read from your latest piece. You always so well encapsulate the moment. I think you did so today as well. You say, rather than be turned off by Mr. Trump's flagrant anger-based appeals along lines of race, gender, religion, national origin, and especially transgender identity, many Americans found them bracing. Rather than be offended by his brazen lies and wild conspiracy theories, many found him authentic. Rather than dismiss him as a felon found by various courts to be a fraudster, cheater, sexual abuser, and defamer, many embraced his assertion that he has been the victim of persecution. How do you explain this morning, Peter, why this happened, why so many people in this country embraced all these things about Donald Trump?
Yeah, he's kind of become a national Rorschach test in some ways, right? We see him now through our own lens. We are a tribal country. It's an us against them kind of moment in our history. And as we saw in the polls, it didn't move very much over the course of this campaign. People were locked in early on to their candidate, whoever it might be. You either liked Trump or you didn't like Trump. And all information then about him was processed through that decision. And if it was negative, that meant it was the elites just kind of coming down hard on him because they're elites, and that's what elites do. And they're looking down on him. They're looking down on us. A lot of his voters obviously felt that way. Whereas a lot of people who don't like him were like astonished, of course, waking up this morning, who might not have stayed up too late, to discover that somebody who has had all of these scandals, has had all of these legal issues, who's been found guilty and liable for all these things, could now be the next president-elect, the first criminal president we've ever had.
It is interesting when you look at his history because, Mr. Secretary, if you go back to when he was in business and you talk to people in New York who were in business with him, worked with him, they will say, terrible businessman, good marketer. A lot of the names that he had plastered on buildings were not his buildings, for example. Right. When he went on television, he became this very successful businessman that a lot of his contemporaries said he wasn't. Which brings me to the message that you understand very clearly, which is national security. The message that he gave on national security was far from traditional for either Republicans or Democrats. It was laser focused on the border, that to keep us safe, it wasn't about NATO, it wasn't about funding, it was about the border. Is that a messaging superiority? What do you see what happened?
It's a messaging superiority that works with his voters, obviously, because he keeps hammering it over and over, and it's his default message as well. I'm sure his people will give him issues to talk about, but he always reverts back to the border over and over again. This third time around with this campaign, and it manages to resonate with a large segment of his base, even though.
But do Democrats let him get away with it? Do they not answer with a clear message?
Not a clear message that will answer it with respect to his base. You know, I said publicly on the network across the street that
That's
I
false,
thought,
by the way.
That I didn't think I was allowed to mention that, but that I thought that Kamala Harris would be tougher on border security than Joe Biden because of her law enforcement background. And that's simply not something that the Trump base wants to hear. They've heard over and over again, they've had it beat into them that Biden and Harris are weak on border security. They're going to let people in, and I'm not. Even though, when you look at the numbers, you actually look at the numbers of border crossings, it began to skyrocket on Donald Trump's watch. The third year he was in office in 2019, it reached almost 1 million. And so it's an aura, it's an image, it's a persona, and this notion of mass deportations is, even if you ask somebody like Tom Homan, who is a huge Trump supporter, will tell you that we just don't have the resources to do that. It's a bumper sticker.
He wants to do it, though.
Well, let me ask you about national security. Let me follow up on that, because you were a consumer of intelligence. As Homeland Secretary, as General Counsel at the Pentagon before that.
Yes.
You're an attorney. And Donald Trump, during his tenure in Helsinki, embraced Vladimir Putin and disavowed his own intelligence agencies to the point where the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, issued a real-time statement while Trump was at the summit in Helsinki, which cost him his job. Dan Coates lost his job.
Right.
Which cost Sue Gordon her job, a career person. There were attempts to, take apart the intelligence agencies that did not succeed with people very close to him whom he put in his final year because there were guardrails.
Right.
And he embraced Netanyahu, who has already called him to congratulate him, told him in public in Mar-a-Lago on July 26th, finish it off in Gaza, do what you can. Go after Iran. I mean, and finish the war. I could finish the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. He said that during this campaign. So what are the implications for concessions to Putin at a negotiating table for Zelensky? I mean, Donald Trump single-handedly stopped Republican funding of the war in Ukraine at a critical juncture last winter, letting Russia advance in Avdiivka and other places, and Ukraine retreat. So is Zelensky going to be forced into a negotiation? Does Netanyahu have free rein? Did he hold up a ceasefire just waiting for Trump? I mean, what are these big implications, and will the national intelligence agencies be taken apart?
Let me add to what you said. We know that President Trump takes it upon himself to share intelligence with whomever. We know about certain instances. There are probably many, many more that we don't know about.
The Russian ambassador in the Oval Office.
Right, we know about that one. That was a big one because that compromised serious sources and means, possibly. And we know about Mar-a-Lago, of course. Trying to discern a foreign policy from out of Donald Trump when, as far as I can tell, it's all largely transactional with people who know how to manipulate him, people who know how to speak his language, people that we know he respects and even admires and worships.
And we should say this has been said by 24 former Trump national security officials in a letter, including Mattis, Kelly, Milley, Esper.
Correct. And the thing that troubles me perhaps the most is you won't have people like that working in this next administration. Because he won't want them, and they probably don't want to be hired in the first place. Who knows who the next DNI is going to be? It won't be somebody the quality of Avril Haines, I can guarantee that.
Maria, I want to get you into this conversation. Obviously, we've spent a little time now on national security. Peter's explained just the realignment and what Americans have been embracing. I wonder, as you look toward this next 4 years, I know that's kind of trying to put yourself far in the future. What are you thinking about? Where do your first thoughts go?
I mean, I think and we were talking about this in the green room. When Trump was elected the first time in 2016, we all were kind of on pins and needles saying, well, he's not really going to do what he said he's going to do. And then he went ahead and did exactly what he was going to do. And I think coming in today, I have to say it was more of a recognition that we have to have better conversations with the country on what this means, because the implications, not just for the most marginalized among us here in the United States, but abroad, is very real. There's a new realignment happening that I don't know if folks will completely comprehend. We can look at the issues of how he doesn't believe in climate change. Those are really big issues that not only will impact us here in the United States, but globally. He doesn't believe in vaccines if he puts Kennedy Jr. there. Well, you know who's going to be really suffering is Gavi. Gavi is basically one of the largest international organizations when it comes to vaccination of children. And today, we are still not at vaccination levels of 2019. This is decimating. And so one of the things that takes stock is, like, what didn't we do? What did we miss? Every single poll missed this tide of the American public. And I do think that when we talk about where we are, there is a new realignment of a coalition of folks that are not getting by. You have massive amount of Americans that are living paycheck to paycheck, and they're not getting the economic relief that they need to feel like they're going to be better off tomorrow than their parents. You look at the Latino community, 70% of the Latino community work in construction, are farm workers, or hospitality. Those aren't union jobs. They're trying to say, you're telling me that I need to care about X, but what I need to figure out is how do I pay rent? And Trump, whether you like it or not, he had that populist message. And while the Democrats have actual material policies for them, that populist message did not break through.